Now, guys, the last two videos have all been related to the Mom's Basement podcast by Keemstar, Faze Banks, and Colossal is Crazy. Of course, I made the episode 1 and episode 2 recap, and also I made pretty much a Twitter clash series video between the Mike Maljack and Colossal is Crazy situation. But in this video, I'm pretty much making another video about the podcast. I promise this will probably be my last one on the Mom's Basement podcast. Pretty much in this video, I want to talk about why Mom's Basement is a complete mess and why the podcast is a complete mess, judging on episode 2. Because even though I did make a recap on episode 1 and 2, I didn't really go too deep onto episode 2. So I thought I might just, go deeper on episode 2 with my Mike Maljack. Now, of course, I did get some feedback on my last two videos. Of course, some people actually did subscribe to the channel, but some thought maybe the quality was extremely bad. And to be fair, the quality isn't the best on this channel. I do agree, but the content is uploaded constantly, and I do promise that if I do earn any money, I will be investing that into. I do have a microphone. Actually, people said, "Why don't you use a microphone?" I do actually have a microphone, but one thing I don't have is an Elgato, which I will be getting. So, yeah, just stay tuned. But let's get into why Mom's Basement is a complete mess. I guess the first reason why I do believe this podcast is a mess. I wouldn't call it a complete mess, just a mess, is that it's just on Spotify. Now, of course, you gotta respect the hustle that they've been able to just sell this podcast off to Spotify exclusively. But to be fair, honestly, a podcast makes a podcast extremely great when you could actually visually see, the members, like in this example, when Mike Maljack and Colossal is Crazy kind of got into this argument, this beef. It would have been nice to see their facial expressions as well, like what facial expression Faze Banks was making, what Keemstar was making. That would just add more element to the podcast, which I thought would be much more interesting. To be fair, we can't really complain that we can't really see their faces because the podcast was signed exclusively to Spotify, which you just gotta, respect that they've been able to make a project and make, something that big that's been sold to Spotify. But really, my main problem with the Mom's Basement series so far is really episode 1 was quite cool. It wasn't, nothing wrong with it, nothing was too special about it. But episode 2 with Mike Maljack was a complete mess. It was a disaster. And that's why this video is titled "Why Mom's Basement is a Mess" so far by Keemstar and Faze Banks. Because during this podcast, it wasn't just the obvious Colossal is Crazy and Keemstar just ganging up on Mike, and it wasn't just Faze Banks. This complete utter explosion. Because if you guys don't know, I don't want to share the footage because it's not right of me to do that. You guys could just go watch the whole podcast, and I assume a lot of you probably have gone and seen the whole podcast. But one thing that did happen was Mike was speaking, and Mike's a good friend of Faze Banks, and pretty much Colossal is Crazy and Keemstar really just ganged up on Mike and would just criticize him and Logan Paul. And Faze Banks was kind of trying to defend it, trying to end the beef and just move on to the next topic. That didn't happen, and pretty much they just got into a huge fight, and this led to Faze Banks actually getting interrupted a lot of times, and he pretty much finally lost it when he starts shouting at Colossal is Crazy, telling him to. He doesn't use the word shut up, but pretty much just to summarize what he said, he pretty much said shut up just in a less disrespectful way. And I guess this kind of, brought the atmosphere, the energy, the vibe just down by a lot. So that was like my first reason to why I believe this podcast was such a big mess. Now, of course, I don't really want to talk about the whole Colossal is Crazy and Mike beef, because that wasn't really during the podcast. This episode is just based on why the episode was a complete mess. Of course, the aftermath of the episode was even worse, but this video is dedicated specifically to the video itself. Thing that I also really didn't like about this episode is the reason I don't think this episode and I think this episode was exclusively just really a mess just because Mike is from the Logan Paul fan, like he's not a Logan Paul fan, obviously. He's part of the Logan Paul team, the Impulsive team, the Maverick team, which makes Keemstar automatically just want to mess around with it. But one thing I didn't like was that Spencer, who was formerly a part of the Impulsive podcast team, would often be referred to as the skinny vegan kid, which by Keemstar, and I think Faze Banks referred to him as the beta of the group, which was kind of disrespectful. And one thing I didn't like by Mike was that he didn't really stand up for Spencer. I mean, Spencer, if you guys don't know, he left the Impulsive team. He decided not to live in this Maverick house, this $6 million mansion. He decided to leave his best friends, his not his hometown, but like one of the most beautiful cities in the world, and he decided to move to Hawaii with a bunch of spiritual people, where he would just go out in the nature, meditate, and do. And I liked what Mike actually said, even though I disagreed with how he defended Spencer. One thing he said was that Spencer was looking for actual change in the world, meaning he wanted to go plant trees, he wanted to go, do that, save the trees, all of that stuff. And even though he was, trying to do something big, he was like constantly referred to as a beta male, as someone who's extremely feminine, as the skinny vegan kid by Keemstar and by Faze Banks. And pretty much Mike actually shaded Spencer as well. I mean, Mike pretty much said that him and Logan would always create an alpha vibe, while Spencer would take that level lower. Of course, Faze Banks referring to him as a beta male, and Mike literally said, "Yeah, yeah. I mean, now that he's not here, it's just complete alpha vibes." So this was pretty much, I would believe, even though it might be true, he is quite skinny, he is a vegan, but it is kind of extremely disrespectful, especially disrespectful by Keemstar and Faze Banks. And one thing that I disliked the most was that Mike didn't even stand up for his boy. I mean, he's just been insulted live on air, and he's not doing anything to help his boy out or anything like that, which was. I didn't like that because, to be fair, Spencer is a good kid. I mean, he's left living the dream life to go and actually to make actual change in this world. But yeah, that was also the second reason why I believe this episode was such a big fail. Now, one more thing that I do believe was kind of disappointing in this podcast was the consistent hate that both Keemstar and Faze Banks would give to YouTube. I mean, they would both consistently say how much they hated the platform, how much they wished it died, and how much they wished another platform would just take over, which I find extremely ironic because they're both millionaires. They've both made extremely a lot of money, and it's all thanks to YouTube. I mean, even the podcast that they have, Mom's Basement, is on Spotify now because it became so big on YouTube. They've been getting 2 million views plus on every single episode thanks to YouTube, and now they're on this podcast on Spotify, pretty much hating on the platform. And let me just put that into consideration. That's like, let's say your best friend helps you pass on an exam, and then the next day you go to the teacher and you're like, "Oh, you know what? I did all of this myself. I did all of this myself. I'm the smartest kid in the class, and you know that guy who." And you see that guy, and then he points to the guy who actually helped him on the exam, and then you'll be like, "Yeah, I hate that guy. He's stupid. I'm smarter than him." That's pretty much how that is, and I know that example probably didn't sound that good, but what I mean is, it's like you going to someone who's created your career, who's supported you your whole life, and just talk smack about them. Like if you go to your mom and be extremely disrespectful to her, or your dad. Pretty much YouTube is the dad or the mom of these YouTubers, of Keemstar and Faze Banks. They're always going to be known as YouTubers. They're not going to be known as something else. And them wishing the platform to like hating the platform and wishing that another platform overtakes it is kind of disrespectful in my opinion. But I'm not gonna lie, this the Faze Banks and Keemstar pretty much hating on YouTube, and um Mike and the other two members, Keemstar and Faze Banks, talking bad about Spencer wasn't really the main problem of this episode of Mom's Basement. The real problem is actually Keemstar and Colossal's Crazy just ganging up on Mike and pretty much ruining the vibe completely. Something that I mentioned earlier in the video, but I want to kind of go back to and um, just give more valid reasons to why I believe this was the main reason the vibe of the podcast and episode was ruined, and why I believe the podcast might become a fail if it continues to be like this. The main problem that I saw was Keemstar and Colossal's Crazy continuously pretty much just bringing up the whole Logan Paul situation, what it did in 2018, and just all the mistakes Logan Paul has done to pretty much just um, attack Mike, who is Logan Paul's best friend, and it just ruins the vibe. I mean, imagine you going on someone else's podcast, and he's gone. Mike actually said this, that the only reason he went on the podcast was to support his. It was a courtesy to Faze Banks, and he doesn't even care about the clown guy who he doesn't even know anything about, or Keemstar. But pretty much this whole podcast led to Mike. It wasn't really a chilled podcast, which I expected. I mean, I wish they could talk about, just anything, in their own lives. But what it turned out to be was just a complete horror show where they would just shout at each other and just attack each other. Remember Mike even at one point where, like, if you look at YouTube and look at the internet, there's no drama channels, there's no channel that spreads negativity that's on the top. Pretty much just shading Keemstar and Colossal is crazy, and pretty much Colossal pretty much acts like calls out Mike as a liar and tells him that you continuously on the podcast say your fans are 16 and above, but in reality you just made a vlog 2 minutes, like 2 weeks ago, where a bunch of 6 and 8 year olds came up to you. Pretty much the whole vibe was ruined, and I didn't really like the podcast, and I believe these were the reasons why everything was wrong with this episode of Mom's Basement. I hope you guys enjoy the video. Of course, I will improve the quality. I'll get an Elgato. I did buy a microphone today. Hopefully that is, makes the audio sound a bit better. But please do subscribe. I feel like the quality is getting better and better. And this is actually the first video of today I will be uploading to. Thank you very much, and make sure to subscribe. I'm trying to get 25 subscribers by the end of this month. Thank you.